Thank you very much, Todd, and I'm really excited to be here. For the next few minutes, I'm going to ask you all to join with me in rethinking our notions of individuality and considering the possibility that the way we typically think about individuality, particularly in the West, might have gone terribly wrong. So what does it mean to be an individual? The evolutionary history of our individuality is one of a series of transitions from simplicity to complexity. Replicating molecules cooperated to form genes. Genes set aside their Richard Dawkins-esque selfishness for the enhanced potential of chromosomes. Chromosomes specialized for particular tasks in order to give rise to protozoa or single-celled life. Cells like these embryonic stem cells have the ability to form multicellular life based on an amazing interdependent division of labor. Multicellular animals have recognized the benefits of sociality and formed complex social networks. And as these networks have grown, public and private institutions have developed to support very large and very complex groups. Now, at each level of additional complexity, cooperation has provided a benefit through specialization and economies of scale, but also exposed the new individual to the vulnerability of the cooperation below. So at each transition, we have to develop mechanisms in order to balance individual advantage with aggregate benefit. We tend to think of these evolutionary transitions as discrete, but in nature that's not necessarily true. As a good friend of mine who's a cell biologist likes to say, when the victuals get scarce, the table manners change. This is slime mold, the single-celled amoeba Dictyostelium discoideum, that responds to resource scarcity by moving in inward spirals until they literally bump into each other in the middle and form a multicellular slug. This new aggregate individual enjoys increased motility and therefore can readily move to an environment where resources are better. And then some of the cells form these beautiful stalks that rise other cells that have become spores up off the ground so they can be scattered about in the microequivalent of suburban sprawl and set up household as single-celled organisms again. Now the lesson in this humble slime mold, as well as other iconic superorganisms like anthills and beehives and schools of fish, is that successful collaboration is not necessarily about groups of individually cooperative organisms, but rather cooperation is a characteristic of the network. Similarly, we tend to think of people as creative or innovative, when the reality is that networks of people are creative and innovative, and knowing something about how to structure those networks properly has a direct impact on productivity. A physician political scientist team at Harvard has recently actually even established that happiness is less about individual psychology and more about the networks in which we live. My own recent research has demonstrated the importance of networks as well. Here, in a model of computer agents where I can experimentally manipulate the architecture of the network and make it more or less likely that reciprocity, here represented as these yellow agents, will emerge as a result of some sort of cultural evolution. And this emergence is independent of the strategies that the individual agents begin the simulation with. And also with chimpanzee social groups, in which my collaborators at Yerkes and I have established that food sharing, while a product of the personalities of the individual chimps, for sure, is also a product of the structure of the networks in which they live. Now, these examples from nature may seem like encouragement, and I think they are, but I worry particularly about placing false hope in some well-known recent studies in which behavioral economists and anthropologists have traveled around the world playing economic games with indigenous people from 15 small societies. And lo and behold, they found that altruistic cooperation was ubiquitous. But Sam Bowles, one of the original authors of that study, a member of the Santa Fe Institute, has more recently called conflict the midwife of cooperation. That in fact it's conflict between groups that made cooperation within groups evolutionarily adaptive. So the fact is, we don't live in small-scale societies. Our problems are not problems of groups of about 150 people, where tens of thousands of years of evolution has produced cognitive capacity for coordination. Our problem is not even here, where systems of laws and cultural norms have evolved in order to make up for the shortcomings of our social evolved brains. Our problem is here, a multi-sovereign, multi-jurisdictional, multicultural world where we're still struggling in order to develop these mechanisms to support coordination in what, at least for now, is the ultimate level of social complexity. And this lack of coordination produces behavior that is unsustainable. Global warming is threatening the rainforest. Over-harvesting is producing increased CO2 concentrations, which in a vicious cycle just makes matters worse. Water tables are falling all around the world and sources of irrigation are disappearing. Global fisheries are collapsing. And increasing energy costs and higher demand, as well as the shifting of food crops into the production of biofuels, has left us with world food shortages at an all-time record level. Suffice it to say that the victuals are getting scarce, and it's time to begin thinking about making decisions as an aggregate individual. So how do we do this? Solving a problem on the scale of global sustainability can seem kind of daunting. Well, I'd make just 2 points. First, realize that stable cooperation at a complex level of social organization depends on sustained cooperation at all lower levels. So start where you feel most comfortable. Most of us are really pretty good at this in our families. Marriages that work are marriages that make aggregate decisions for the benefit of the family. But how many of us have been to a neighborhood association meeting or something like that, where the loudest voices in the groups are those that have their own individual interest in mind. So let's start there. You be the loud voice at your next neighborhood association meeting, PTA meeting, or book club for aggregate benefit, whether or not it serves your individual needs at this particular point in time. And then once you've cut your teeth there, set your sights on the city council. And secondly, be a responsible consumer. When you purchase items like a hybrid automobile, an organic grocery item, or the recycled flooring that we're all sitting and standing on here today, it may cost you a tad bit more at that particular moment, but the public good that you generate accrues all the way to here. In short, act on what matters for us all. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for your attention.